afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you happen to be when watching this. This is going to be another bonus episode or kind of ad hoc episode on this channel. I have a regular, well now regular, podcast episode coming out every kind of 2 weeks, normally kind of on a Thursday or a Friday. And then I want to run these kind of ad hoc videos alongside those just to kind of give deep dives into different topics, or maybe kind of give a bit of a retrospective view on my knitting, because if you are new to this channel, welcome. This is a very, very new channel. I've literally just started in the last month or so. For returning viewers who are viewing this alongside other podcast episodes and my 2 videos on everything I have knit to date, thank you so much for coming back and continuing to support this channel and this space. The support I have received from everyone has been really, really touching and really humbling. Actually, I never expected to be getting these kind of comments and support, and I think it really is just a credit to the knitting community that we all really lift each other up. So thank you so much. So without further ado, today I thought I'd go into a couple of my long-term whips. So on my regular podcast episodes, I'll talk through kind of current projects, future plans, finished objects, maybe a couple of yarn acquisitions. But whilst you may see me pick up some of these whips and hopefully finish them, there might be a bit of background that maybe is too in-depth for those kind of regular podcast episodes. So thought I'd take a bit more time here to go through those projects in a bit more detail, and I think really continue on that theme of what I have learned so far in my knitting journey. And I think whilst those finished objects I showed you in the kind of 2-part series on everything I've knit do contain a lot of learnings and a lot of joy, I think the things that are still on my needles and have been for a really, really long time probably contain some of the biggest learnings, and that's why they're not finished, right? So grab a cup of tea, grab a cup of coffee, soft drink, whatever you fancy, get comfy, and I'll take you through these projects. And hopefully my kitten won't interrupt us, and hopefully calls from work won't interrupt us, because I am recording this yet again in my lunch break. So apologies if any of those things happen. Okay, I got my cup of coffee. Apologies, it's not in the most inspirational piece of pottery. It's in a rather cheesy mug with pint of coffee written on it, but I went for bigger and better in this instance. It is definitely a large coffee kind of day. Okay, so where to begin? These will not be in chronological order. I will try and give a rough idea of when I cast them on and when I've been working on them and at what point they kind of fell into the abyss of long-term whips. But yeah, I will just kind of pick them up and get going. Okay, so this first long-term whip was cast on during the period where I was knitting absolutely loads of the Strange Brew sweaters. Actually a bit before this one that I'm wearing right now. This is from the work.knits Strange Brew recipe pattern book. And I was experimenting using that recipe in terms of the stitch counts and the shaping for textured sweaters rather than just colourwork sweaters. So what am I talking about? Let me hold this up. So this is knit on 3.75mm needles, and the top part is in, it's very crumpled, sorry. Top part is knit in West Yorkshire Spinners Fleece DK in this burnt orange kind of colour. The bottom half is knit. If you watched my other video, there's the jumper, the raglan jumper colour work that I knit using 2 strands of the Uppingham yarns, kind of British tweedy yarn, name and exact origin unknown. Well, I used that again, held double here to match the DK weight of the West Yorkshire Spinners. So this has actually been bound off on the body. It's got a small bit of rib at the bottom. It's got a kind of colourwork transition section between the 2 colours. It has part of a sleeve. Why haven't I finished this, I guess, is the main question. So I think I was trying to use this white yarn across multiple different projects, and this body was knit a little bit short, and I could go back in and lengthen it, but why didn't I? I think, simultaneously to realising I did have enough yarn to go back in and lengthen it, two things happened in relation to this burnt orange. So before knitting this, I tried to knit the honeycomb sweater. Is it called the honeycomb sweater by Drea Ray Knits, or Andrea Mowry is the designer. And I tried to knit that in this yarn, and I think that was the first sweater pattern I bought, and I realised that was just way too adventurous for a first sweater. Well, probably for some people they'd be talented enough to be able to do it straight off. I couldn't get my head around the kind of stitches that were on hold, and at that point I wasn't up to speed enough on gauge, etc. So anyway, I tried to knit that in this yarn, so I think I was also kind of not quite committed one way or the other. Anyway, the long and the short is, it's left like this. I think the yoke is actually pretty good. I mean, it would still fit, it would still work. I have gone back in and picked up to increase the depth of the collar, so I quite like that. I could finish this project. Why won't I? Well, I might, but I think I'd need to purchase, I don't like the combination of yarns. I like them visually, I don't like them for feel. So I think I'd need to go and purchase some more West Yorkshire Spinners Fleece DK, maybe in the burnt orange, maybe in a pale colour, so that I'm kind of mimicking the style of this. So I could do that. The other thing that I didn't particularly like, and this might be a bit of a controversial view, but I just didn't really enjoy knitting with this West Yorkshire Spinners yarn. It's got quite a long staple length, I believe, and it means it's kind of got this drape and this sheen, but then it's quite rustic as well, and it's quite, the best word I can use to describe it is crunchy. Now, I don't know if that's just because I've had this yarn for ages, it's been caked up, that can affect the spin on the yarn, but the long and the short is, for whatever reason, I just don't love it. Now, if I recreated or kind of revisited this, I could maybe make it into something I love. So yeah, that's where we're at, guys. I think I've even still got, I was just saying, I've even still got the stitch markers in the sleeve, indicating the frequency of my decreases, so that's quite handy. So I definitely could go back in. Watch this space, we'll see what we do with this one. But yeah, I think the big lesson learned from this one, if I was going to have a takeaway, is I think if I want to do multiple projects with one yarn, I need to just buy enough yarn to do both projects. Which I know sounds really obvious, but sometimes when your budget is tight, it's tempting to try and squeeze multiple projects out, and I just think that just leads to situations like this where you basically end up not committing to one thing or another and just ending up uncertain. So yes, that's that project. Okay, I'm gonna have a sip of coffee and then I will go on to the next one. And spill my coffee down me, evidently. That's not going to be ideal given that I'm wearing very light coloured trousers today. Okay. Right, the next one I'm going to show you is going to be quite hard to show actually. But I'm going to be referring a lot to the videos that I have recently put out, like literally, I mean, I'm recording this in the same week I've put them out, but let's go with kind of end of Feb. The two videos I put out on everything that I've knit, I'm going to be referring to those a lot, so if you would be interested and you think you'd find it helpful, please do feel free to go and check those out and then come back to this video. But I'm referring to them more just for context on timelines, so for those that have watched both, I'm not repeating myself too much. So, in that Everything I've Knit sweater edition, I mentioned that I had done a colourwork sweater from the Strange Brew Tin Can Knits pattern that I had actually been really, really happy with, but that was too cropped, and where I didn't have enough yarn to go back in to make it longer, which was a real shame because I loved the sweater, and because of the design of it, I didn't think it would look right to kind of go back in and do sweater surgery to reinsert colourwork, and I didn't think putting any sort of kind of contrasting bottom would make sense, and I think to try and match the yarn would have been really hard. So I'm part way through frogging it, but I thought I'd include it in this long-term whips because it's just sat being unworn for ages, and because I didn't show it in the sweater video because it is half frogged at this stage. Haha. So this is where it's frogged up to. As you can see, I mean, this was like my second attempt at colour work and I was really proud of this. So the colour work is knit up in Beach and Bouche, Petite Lamb's wool. That is the kind of turquoisey colour, like the aquamarine colour and the dark blue. And then the pinky tones are from a shopper ball, crazy shopper ball. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly. As always, I will try and include links below. I know on the 2 Everything I Have Knit videos I have not yet got to show notes, so apologies, please bear with me, but they will come. So yes, and I'm frogging it. So the things that I really liked was 1, the colour work was really even, well, at least compared to some of my other attempts. 2, I actually just really loved my choice of motifs. And 3, the sleeves turned out really nicely and fit really well and had these, for me, these are the deepest cuffs I'd knit at that point, and I really liked those, and I liked the bind off. There was just loads of things I really liked about it. So it was a real shame that I had to frog it. And in case you're one of those people that loves to see the inside, there are my floats. It still gives me joy. Even now I still look at it and go, oh, that was a good piece of knitting. So what I am considering is what I want to do with this yarn that is now in these 2 massive balls. The other thing is I had to hold the yarn off the cone double, and I don't know about anyone else, but trying to unravel yarn held double to then take it back to the point where it's just single strand, that is not a very nice prospect for me. So yes, I think in terms of what I could do with the yarn going forwards, it's not limited, but I am restricted by the fact I've held it double because I am not unwinding it back into single strand. So my options are, 1, I could frog this back but to the point where it's just the yoke, which is basically what I've done on the one side, and it's actually holding together really well. So I could put a piece of waste yarn through the yoke and I could just keep that as a memento of, you know, my early knitting, and I could put that up on a wall somewhere as a piece of kind of art, knitting art. Or if I think I could use the yarns again, which I can use them for something, if I've got a kind of clear idea, then I could just take a picture and then I could continue to frog it all. So some choices to make there, but anyway, I wanted to feature this somewhere, so now it has been featured. It's had its time. Okay, next project from a while later than that one, maybe a year or so later. This one is going to be hard to pick up again. Loads of these have got balls of yarn kind of hanging off them. Okay, this is my first steeked project. Okay, this is knit again, strange brew sweater recipe from Tin Can Knits. They even include the instructions on steeking. I really wanted to try steeking. I wanted to try a colourwork yoke without kind of different motifs. I wanted to kind of use just one motif. This is showing up beautifully on camera. This is knit in Holst Garn, super soft, which I've mentioned quite a bit, and I've realised I've failed to say what the fibre content is. It's 50% merino, 50% Shetland wool. It's a really beautiful blend. So this is held single strand. This was knit also on 3.75mm needles, and yeah, where am I up to on it? I have knit one sleeve, I've knit the front bands and can go back in and put buttons on it if I wish, and then I have knit part of the second sleeve. Why did this get abandoned? Well, so for one, I mean, I haven't blocked it yet, but I was going through a phase where I wanted kind of slightly more tight fitting stuff, and so it is quite a tight fitting cardigan, which, yeah, and it's quite cropped because, again, this was during the period where I was cropping sweaters and I was trying to figure out what the optimum body length from under the arms, like I wanted to figure out my perfect level of ease under the arm, and then my perfect level of ease off the body, and then my perfect length of the body. And I just don't think I got it quite right on this. It's kind of hard to show without putting it on. And then, I'm just going to leave that there, it's easier. And then the other thing is, I think this was in the phase where I was knitting my sleeves like this. And the problem with that is I just don't know if I'm going to like, I don't know if you can see the, there we go, that's probably better. It's got that kind of slight gather at the sleeve, and again, I just don't know if that's my style anymore. So really, I'm making excuses. I should just go in. I've still got enough yarn left. Oh, and my bind off was a little bit tight on my sleeve. I should really just go back in, and I should just finish this, is what I really should do. And stop making excuses. And I'm sure I'd love wearing it. It's just I probably won't put buttons on it, to be honest. And I might redo the pickup on the steek. I don't know, because the button band, maybe this will be solved with blocking, but the button band's like pulling in from, so it's not in line with the edge of the bottom of the sweater. But yeah, I think maybe I can block that out. Yeah, basically I'm making excuses, and I probably should just finish it. And I just need to redo the bottom of that one sleeve and then just finish the other sleeve. Stop making excuses. Anyway, colourways, just in case you're interested. The lighter orange is Gold Crest. The darker orange is Ember. And the blue is actually a really beautiful shade. I don't know if it's going to come up on camera, but it's got like a slight green in it. And that is Mariner. So a really beautiful colourway. So I should just get that done. Okay. More coffee, more coffee, more coffee. All right. For this one, I have even less excuses for this one than I do the one I've just shown you. Okay, also knit at a similar time. This is inside out, so please excuse that. This is a raglan shaped sweater based broadly on the stitch counts from the no frill sweater. It's knit up also in Holsgarn in the shade Tundra, held single, also on 3.75mm needles if I remember correctly. So this has got a really deep rib at the bottom, or at least a pretty deep rib. And then you might be able to see, even though it's inside out, down the front I did this like panel of rib, essentially. And I love this. This was probably one of my first semi-self-designed things that I had made that I loved. I then wore this loads, to the point where like you can see the felting under the arms, which I won't show you because it's not particularly nice to see. But anyway, I wore this loads. So this has been a successful project. But two things. One, because it's not got masses of positive ease on me, and because of that, the raglan shaping was pulling my ribbing out of shape. It was making my neckline look square, and I wanted a rounded neckline. So what I did was I went back in and I have picked up the collar again. So you've almost got like a double stacked collar now, which has happened on quite a few of my sweaters, more through accident than not, but I actually quite like the look of it. And the other added advantage is by going back into your cast on edge and then picking up stitches for the collar, you've created more structure, which means when the weight of the sweater is hanging off that structured seam and not off your ribbing, which means your ribbing doesn't go out of shape. So I actually would really encourage, obviously, going back in on top of an already knit rib collar. Less ideal. As I say, for me it kind of works, but I wouldn't like recommend it unless you like that look. But what I would recommend is, and I have started to do on all my projects going forwards, is I will knit from beneath the rib. So I will cast on my stitches beneath the rib, then just knit flat and then come back in and knit the collar on it. And I know it's something Andrea Mowry in her I'll Knit If I Want To podcast series has also been recommending, and I think it's such a good tip. I think since we've all transitioned, I say all, there are still people who like to knit flat, but I think a lot of us have moved to knitting in the round. And I think whilst that's a great transition, and I think you can still get very nicely tailored garments knitting in the round, one thing we potentially have lost a bit is some of the structural elements that come from knitting things flat. And I know in my second episode of my more regular podcast, I've been showing the Medina top that I'm working on, and that has got a 3 needle bind off on the shoulder, which would be a technique. It's kind of combining the best of working in the round and working flat, because you're kind of bringing two sides together. And the structure that creates and the way the fabric then hangs is beautiful and just feels more sturdy. So I think it's just something for us to consider. I'm working on a design at the moment, which I'll show in my main podcast, which really plays on the structural elements of knitting flat. So I will tell you more then. Anyway, massive tangent. So when I first knit this, I quite like the sleeves. They were quite wide with these deep cuffs to reflect what was going on at the hem, with these quite pretty increases in the cuffs. These finished on me about here, and I quite like that for a spring summer look. If you head over to my Instagram, which is work.knits, you will see a picture of me styling this jumper with a pair of work trousers, and it does look really smart, but for the winter it really didn't work. So the reason this is now in a long-term works in progress video is because I have got needles on the other sleeve, and basically I was trying to decide whether I wanted to re-knit from about here and actually do shaping and make them long. I've taken a slightly rogue choice. We're going to see how I feel about this choice. I might decide I hate this look, but I have kept the original sleeve. I have then undone my cast off. I don't know if you can see the transition from blocked and worn to unblocked, but I've undone my cast off, and I am knitting these ribbed sleeves at the circumference and stitch count that they were left at. I am continuing to knit them, and I will make them longer. And I actually think I could probably finish this quite quickly. I just need to set aside some time to do so. But I think the reason I'm being less motivated to finish it is because I just don't know if I'm going to like the end look. Excuse me. So yes, that's where we're up to. A bit of an interesting one. Like little experiment. Maybe when I've actually done the sleeves, I will show it in the main podcast and get some thoughts on the end look from all of you. Okay, we are rattling through these at quite a good pace. Next up, we're going to continue on the theme of unfinished sweaters. Okay, this one kind of makes me want to cry. I'm going to leave you hanging, having said that, because I need a sip of coffee. Okay, so I cast this one on relatively recently, and it's one of those ones you're either going to love or hate my colour combination. It was very unusual for me, but I was so happy with this yoke. I love it. As you can see, it is a cardigan. It is not steeked, it is worked flat with a double folded collar. Look at all my lovely floats. And I had separated for the sleeves, and I was working on the body. Right. Then I realised that I had separated for the sleeves whilst in some training for work. In my defence, this was a 1 to 2 hour training session, and by knitting I was helping myself focus because I was listening and my hands were engaged, and so I wasn't getting distracted. Question marks over whether I should be knitting whilst at work, but hey. The big learning for me is not to do that, because I was focusing evidently so hard on the training that I completely fudged my stitch counts on the split for the front. As you might be able to see, this side is drastically smaller than this side. So I need to go back in. I've got my stitches on hold for the sleeves, so I can follow that through and basically put a retrospective lifeline in at the end of my yoke, and then rip back and then resplit. But it's just painful, and I don't really want to have to do it. But yes, this is why this is a long-term whip. This would have been done super quickly if it had not been for this. I was powering through this. I think I did this yoke in maybe 2 evenings. I loved it. I was storming. And the idea is to have, so I'm gonna have quite deep front bands on this. And the idea is to have a relatively tight fitting, thick cardigan, because that's what I really needed in my wardrobe at the time. And it is using yarn that I had originally knit into a slipover. That slipover looked really impressive in photos. I had designed a cable for the front of it. I don't think I have a photo, or maybe I do. If I have a photo, I will try and put it up in this video. If I don't, I don't. But it had a really intricate cable design. It had ribbing down the sides. It was meant to be quite fitted, but in a worsted weight yarn, it was so unflattering. It removed any kind of shape off the front of my body, but then also removed shape off the sides, but that was despite the fact it was tight fitting, so it kind of just made me look like a blob. And it was really bizarre. I still to this day can't quite understand why it didn't work, but hey, it didn't. So I unravelled it. The yarn is, oh goodness, I should have looked this up before starting to record. It might come back to me. It might. It's a really beautiful, smooth worsted weight. I had several skeins of this. What was this yarn? I don't know. Okay, soz guys, I have no idea. It will come to me at some point. I'll be looking through a yarn shop's website at some point and I'll go, aha, that's what it is. Oh, is it a Fiberco? It might be a Fiberco. Worsted. Don't know. Right, I'm going to stop taking up your time with trying to remember. The colour work in this is knit in, I'm just having a look at it. So some of it's got some of the blue worsted from Triskelion yarns that I used to make a hat, which again is in my accessories video. Some of it is Jameson Smith 4-ply held double, because that's quite an airy woolen spun yarn, so you can knit it at worsted gauge. Then then the bright purple is, or purpley pink, is that is a Fiberco mini skein, I believe. And yeah, I think that's everything apart from the main yarn, which is probably the bit that's of most interest. Sorry. So that's that one. There's just bits of yarn coming off that all over the place. Right, another sip of coffee. Okay. Also on sweater languishing whips is this measly thing. Okay, this is knit in Rowan tweed yarn. Sad story with it. Well, sad but nice story. One of my best friends bought me, this was right back, this was third year of uni or second year of uni, so I was kind of really getting into knitting, but I hadn't kind of broken into Ravelry and all that kind of stuff. For my birthday, they bought me a John Lewis gift card with the intention that I could go in and buy some stuff for knitting. So I went in and I bought the Rowan Valley Tweed pattern book, which includes a number of different lovely patterns by Rowan, and I bought myself this yarn, which is blowing out on camera. It's a lot darker than it's looking. It's really blowing out. It's more of a, that's more true. It's like a cherry. I've got loads of this caked up because I bought 3 or 4 skeins with the idea of making, there is a pattern in that book that's just like a really simple round necked, quite quite straight body, slim sleeves. It's knit flat. That was my plan to make that. My recollection is I had pretty much finished it, and then I at the time did not have the skills to pick up the collar, because even though it's knit flat, it then wanted you to pick up stitches in the round, and I didn't have any circular needles, and I just didn't know how to do it. And then I think I broke a strand trying to do it, and then yeah, I can't remember. I think I broke a stitch on the cast off edge from a piece that was knit flat, and then that then unwound vertically, and I didn't know about fixing stitches at the time, and it just turned into a real mess. So then I think then shortly afterwards I learned about Ravelry. I came across the no frill sweater, and I was like, okay, I will just unravel all of that and I will I'll knit it but as a no frill sweater. And then, as you can see, I cast that on and then just haven't done anything. I have also purchased in the last couple of years a flatbed knitting machine, a vintage knitting machine, and I also tried to knit the original pattern that I was going to knit from Rowan, but on the knitting machine. So this yarn has had a real pasting, actually. I've really put it through its paces because I keep trying to reuse it for different things. Anyway, I will actually knit something out of it at some point, and it will be super nostalgic. Whether I will have enough for a sweater that I like now, I don't know. I was a lot smaller back then, so I think I was knitting the smallest size, which would not be appropriate for me anymore. So we will see. Keep your eyes posted, or keep your eyes peeled. I'll keep you posted. Words today. But yes, it's a really beautiful yarn, actually. As I said, it's really blowing out, but I don't know if you can see, you probably can't. There's it's got what looks like a very, very fine wool, or maybe even cotton strand within the ply that is lighter than the rest of the yarn in it. So the main yarn is a dark kind of cherry colour, and then it's got this lighter yarn that really, one single thread within the ply that brings a real brightness but also depth to the colour. And then it's got tweedy flecks in blues, oranges, browns. I think there's one or two greens in here. It's a really beautiful yarn, so I would love to knit something in it at some point. Maybe we'll get this a bit further than it currently is. Okay, we've got maybe 3 or 4 projects left to go, and they're getting smaller, so don't worry. This is quite funny. I knit, so I bought loads of Jameson Smith yarn, the little cakes, for a couple of colourwork projects, and just because I'd heard a lot about it. There was a big boom where people were talking about it a lot online and in knitting podcasts, and I just wanted to learn a bit more about it, really, and I did a couple of kind of gift knits in it. Anyway, I made this tiny fingerless glove. It's got a little cable up the top. It's quite cute, really. It's got a thumb hole. I need to weave in the ends. It's not, but the funny thing was, I knit it because I was like, oh, that'd be cute. It doesn't really fit with my aesthetic. I don't really wear fingerless mitts like this. If I'm wearing something on my hands, it's because my hands are cold and they need to be covered. So I just never knit the second one. I think I still have this yarn. It's I have no idea what the colourway is, but it's this greeny blue. So yeah, I could knit another one, but yeah, it's just currently a lonely, languishing one fingerless mitt. But yeah, proof that I can do cables, hey? So that's another one. Actually, I must have a thing about fingerless mitts, because here's another one. Again, ends not woven in at all, but this is a 2x2, 2x2 ribbed fingerless mitt. And I think I knit this one, I think I mentioned in my my Everything I've Knit accessories episode that I've recently made some fingerless mitts for my sister, and I've gifted them to her. I think this was my original plan for those, and then I just never made a second one, which is silly because I have enough yarn to make another one. So maybe that would be a quick thing to finish, and maybe I can gift her a second pair. We will see. But as you can see, there's kind of a mixture of things where like either something's gone wrong and I have then just not had the resilience to tackle it right now. And then there's other stuff where it's more that I've evidently got distracted by another project and I just have never completed the pair, or yeah, I've just paused. Okay, we're going to another one we'll go to two that are not because I've just lost interest. Sorry, lots of ducking down. These are not because I've lost interest. These are because they didn't work out the way I wanted them to, which is sad. So this, ta-da, this is quite a chunky piece of knitting for something that is never going to go anywhere. This was knit. It started off with the intention of being the shift shawl by Andrea Mowry. Purchased the pattern, loads of people have knit it. There is no way I can afford to knit it in spin cycle. So I was knitting it in another one of those crazy shoppable sock yarn balls, which I really rate, by the way. I think the colour gradation is beautiful. Da, 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 da. The grey kind of colour in the background of this is actually a John Arbon barber pole yarn. Sorry, I do this because that's the word I was looking for the other day in one of my other videos. Yeah, this was a barber pole yarn, and it's kind of a combination of what looks like a kind of lilac-y grey colour and then a kind of darker charcoal-y grey. I've still got most of the skein. I think, and I will put more info when I'm about to produce another project with it. So I will give more information on the yarn, and I may end up correcting myself, but I think it is actually their non-superwash sock base. And I got a skein of that because my future mother-in-law gifted me a membership to John Arbon Mill back during the pandemic. I unfortunately have not had a chance to go because they are only open during the week. They're not open at the weekends, which is when I'm free. But yeah, for anyone who hasn't heard of John Arbon Textiles is a yarn company, but they are also a mill in the southwest of the UK. They are kind of Devon way, I think, and they are actually the mill that produces quite a lot of the fibre. Well, they process a lot of the fibre for a lot of the small British yarn producers, so those that are taking fibre from British sheep that are in a flock they own. I'm trying to think of some of the brands off the top of my head. Maybe that's going to be a whole nother episode, but there's a really interesting thing happening with UK fibre sheds at the moment. Again, won't go into details on what a fibre shed is, but maybe again that's for another episode. Again, huge tangent, but the shift shawl. Why did I stop knitting this? Well, first I deviated from the stitch patterns because I have to be in a certain mood to knit mosaic. Like for this yoke on this sweater, I absolutely loved it. And I think I've heard other people say this, like it's just really monotonous actually. Not fun sometimes. Sometimes it can be, but anyway, I was not feeling it. So I deviated from Andrea's kind of recipe and just started kind of repeating the same thing over and over again, which you could argue makes it even more monotonous. But I was trying to transition it from needing my attention but not being very interesting to being more potato chippy and mindless. This is nothing against Andrea's pattern, because her pattern's really well written and loads of people have loved it. I think it was more like the mood that I was in, and that wasn't vibing with mosaic knitting. Anyway, and then so in that sense I was quite happy with the kind of striped effect and the transition and the stitch pattern that I was getting, but the reason I stopped this is because whilst these were two barber pole yarns that I had in my stash, and they do kind of go together, and I like it from a kind of artistic colour work, colour combination perspective, there is just no way I'm going to wear something this dark contrasting with this kind of pink and sunset. This just won't fit into my wardrobe. So I'm trying to be more discerning about my own projects and be really clear in my mind that, like, is this filling a space in my wardrobe, or is this giving me joy from an artistic perspective? And if it doesn't fit either of those, then it goes, and the yarn gets reused. And I think whilst it does kind of fit, you know, what I like from an artistic perspective, I think there are things that I could take joy from on both accounts that I could make with this yarn if I reused it. So I have that pattern purchased. Maybe I'll return to it at a point when I'm feeling like mosaic knitting more, but for now this is getting frogged and the yarn is getting reused. Wow, I'm being really rambly, I do apologise, but I hope you're still with me. If you need to pause and come back, please do. This next one is a really weird and wonderful one. So, kind of inspired by the shift shawl pattern from Andrew Murray, but before I had bought it, I think I was watching again the Happy Knitting podcast, Julia, who hosts that, and she had taken the kind of basic idea and then had just run with it in her own way, and I loved that idea. And so I grabbed a load of scraps and I cast on an enormous asymmetric shawl. And the first few bits, you can see at the top there, that bit I really like. And then I've kept these kind of tassely bits on the end, and I was going to start plaiting them, and it was meant to be just something I could throw around my shoulders, combination between a shawl and a blanket, perfect for working from home. But I did not plan how I was then going to incorporate scraps. I just kind of went with it. And I really don't like half the colours I put in afterwards. Here we go. I like my colour sense kind of up until about here, and then I just don't know what happened with all of this, but this is just particularly like this. This is just not me. It's not showing up quite right on camera, but this is an absolutely monstrous piece of knitting, as you can see. I mean, it's like literally my wingspan, just under. I mean, it's huge. This was hours and hours and hours of work. So there's part of me that is like, do I just finish it and then, I don't know, but then the thing is I just don't know what I'd do with it. But then if I unravel it all, these are such like small chunks of yarn that like all they could go into would really be like, they could go into like a scrap blanket project, which to be fair, I do have one on the go. I haven't shown that on the podcast yet, but I do. Or to be used as like scraps within a yoke, but yeah, I mean, I can't remember how many stitches I'm up to. I'm going to do a bit of a guesstimation for you here. What's happened there? Interesting. I think I'm probably at something like 150 stitches, maybe a tiny bit under. This is currently on like a whole pair of needles, which I think are like sock needles, like 2.75 or something. Yeah. Any thoughts on what I should do with this? Let me know. But this is a huge languishing width, and this is hours of work, which always makes me think, like, am I just being a bit over dramatic by saying I'm going to frog it? And as I said, if I do frog it, like, what am I actually going to use the yarn for? At the same time, this is not going to bring me joy if it's sat around. It's just going to annoy me because I don't like my colour combination. So yeah, all thoughts are welcome. That's a genuinely big troubled project that I have no idea what to do with. Okay, we're down to the last like few. We're getting there. This next one's a tiny one. This is a languishing whip because I cast it on when I had just bought the Japanese Stitch dictionary. It's got like over 250 designs. More details are on my blog on www.work.knits.co.uk. But essentially it just uses one of the charts, and it's a beautiful chart, and I was going to write this up as a pattern. I've just done like a applied I-cord edge like as I go, and then it's got the lace up the middle, and it was just going to be kind of a simple scarf design and then really let the lace sing. But it is very involved, and it requires a lot of focus, and that's why I just haven't come back to it, but I will. This is one I definitely will finish. And this has been knit in Holst yarn again, super soft again. It's been knit in the leftover skeins from a sweater I knit for my dad. It took me 3 attempts, but I got there. This is in the shade Almond, and I'm just holding it single. And I think this will probably take me about two cakes, which is about 100 grams. So that will be one that hopefully you will see getting finished on the podcast. This is kind of a representation of quite a few whips over the years that have just kind of slowly died a death. I just love playing with colour, and so sometimes I just cast things on just to see colour combinations come together, and that's kind of what that massive shawl was supposed to be. Another example of one where I'm like, I could take it or leave it, is this. It's the beginning of what will be a cowl probably, and I wanted to keep the yarn in between plain, so that is a Holst sock yarn in just their like natural base, and then there's just a number of minis and scraps in this. I won't go into detail on like every single one of them, but yes, whether I pick this back up, who knows, who knows. It kind of is what I wanted and is not what I wanted. Yeah, and again it comes back to that question of, are you making things for the process or for the product? But then if you make all these products and then you don't use them, what do you do with them? But this one I could gift. I'm sure like someone would enjoy this. I made quite a similar cowl. This one will probably end up being I'll probably end up joining the ends, so it'll be like a double thickness, and kind of the stripes will go vertically rather than horizontally. I did make another cowl that I knit for my future mother-in-law, who is super knit worthy, and that was using scraps, but that was super successful, and she wears that daily. So maybe if I finish this would be kind of up her alley, but I don't know. But that kind of represents a few projects in and of itself. Also on the whips pile, I have this. This could be finished really quickly, so maybe I will just go ahead and actually do that. That might be a good idea. This is this will essentially be a hand towel for my bathroom, I think. And this was quite a nice project because I combined newly found crochet skills with knitting skills. So as you can see, the centre of this is super stretchy. This is a textured pattern from a WI Stitch dictionary. I've mentioned before I'd love to link to it, but they just don't make it anymore, and it's not held in many secondhand bookshops. But it's essentially a combination of knit and purl stitches in rib pattern with garter breaks in it. So I knit a square, and then I've essentially gone, a rectangle actually, and then I've gone in and I've used a 3mm crochet hook to do single crochet stitches with an increase at the corners, not following any kind of pattern or instructions. I don't know if those are correct, but they've kind of worked. And then I've just been going round and round and round with the crochet hook, and for some reason I just stopped. I think this was this was sat in my desk drawer, and if I had meetings again where I wasn't really focusing well enough, then I'd pull this out. And I think basically I just replaced that project with something else in my desk drawer, and that's why this didn't get finished. But I think I'll do like maybe one more round of crochet and then it's done. And the nice thing about crochet is there's no kind of cast off because the edge is kind of finished each row. So yeah, and this is knit in Rowan Glacé, I think, which is their kind of silky cotton. It's beautiful, like it feels lovely. And I think this colourway is Mineral. Ooh, colourway knowledge, yarn knowledge for once. Not like that worsted yarn that I have no idea about. So yes, that's kind of a bit of a rogue one, but very easily finished, so I better get going on that. I have then got, and I'll do two at once with this, I've then got 2 sock projects that are both at a similar point. Ta-da, ta-da. So both have had the heel heel flap and turn and gusset knit. Same on this one. This is knit in a yarn that I don't actually know what it is. It was bought for me by my future mother-in-law again. It's got a stellina in it, a silver stellina in it, and it was bought from like a local yarn shop to them. And I think in buying it and driving it home, somehow the ball band got lost. So I just got given this kind of wound up ball of sock yarn. And it's in like a cream, a grey and a brown, like a sandy colour. And I added down the front, I think, to be honest, this sock will probably be worn with the pearl bumps side out, because I added in at the top of the sock just a little knit stitch design. But it's just, I think I might gift these. This probably isn't my colourway, but it's a lovely yarn, and yeah, I think I just got part way through it and paused. No other reason really. This is quite a nice sock yarn, whatever it is, because it's got a really defined ply to it, and it's got really good high twist, so the stitches are kind of really nice and plump. And then yeah, the stellina base makes it slightly sparkly. I don't know if you'll be able to catch that. This sock that I'm showing with it was knit around the same time. This is from my heel flap and gusset learnings. I think I probably overdid the number of, not stitch count. This stitch count looks too big, which I think is why I've paused on these. But what I did quite like that I have done, so I've used 2 colours to knit this, and I did a slip stitch design down the front, which I think was mimicking a pair of socks that I'd seen that Andrew Mowring had produced, and at the time I wasn't on enough of a sock knitting kick to be like, yeah, I'm going to get that pattern, but I thought I could kind of replicate it. So I do really like the slip stitches. I think this stitch count is too big. This is knit in socks, coop knits, socks, yeah, fingering base. The orange is the same orange that I've just used to design a pair of socks. It's called Almadine. And then the other kind of multicoloured yarn is from Malabrigo. It's just one of their, I think the colourway is like a number, not a name. But yes, the stitch count on those looks wrong to me, so I think that's why I paused on that. I've still got quite a lot of the Malabrigo, so maybe I will make something different out of that. I'm sure the yarn card is probably in the centre of that, and I just haven't found it. Anyway, so that's that. Okay, last 2 I think, and these have been knotted together by my cat, so I'm going to have to show them kind of together, unfortunately. And now I've just dropped the yarn, which is really not going to improve the situation at all. Okay, the first one is really, oh my goodness, these are really knotted. And I didn't think I had time to unknot them all before showing you. Right. This will be a cow. This is some of the most in-depth colour work. Ugh. The end design will be beautiful, but this is so involved. So I'm knitting this in a single strand of whole skein in, I think they call it like robin's egg or topaz or something, and then I'm holding it with a navy blue mohair held double or even single, and single strand of mohair. Haha, what was I thinking? This is from a knitting book, a Fair Isle knitting book that is, again, details are on my blog, and it basically takes modern Fair Isle knitting colourwork charts and shows you how to apply them to different garment and accessory types. A really clever idea, and the chart is kind of in a, how do I describe it? The colourwork is in rows, like in kind of almost like bands. I wouldn't call it stripes because that kind of implies that they're smaller, but like in full-on bands. So you can see I've kind of knit just past one band. You can see the line here. But the charts are massive, like 200 plus rows, all the rows being different. So again, it's just really, really involved. I think I will like the finished product. I think it will be very in my wardrobe aesthetic, but just a lot of effort. So I will return to that at some point when I've also managed to, look at that, that's horrific, when I've managed to unknot that from this other project, which I'm about to show you. So yeah, yarn combo there. Okay, do some unknotting. Okay, this next project, reasonably successful. So I think in the accessories everything I've knit video, I showed you a purple asymmetric shawl that I've knit, blending from one colour to another, and I said that one I just didn't think I'd wear. I've actually just found the wool bands for that in a sock project bag, so maybe I'll have to go back and give some more details on that. But this is knit in 2 skeins of yarn from Black Elephant, and I want to say the white one is called Nostalgia, and I can't remember what the other one's called. I want to say it had like squirrel in the name, but maybe I'm completely off, and that's another one from River Knits. But this is just plain garter stitch, not with a pattern. This is just me kind of freestyling, and it's an asymmetric shape, so I'm just increasing 1 stitch on one side every other row. And it's been knit on 4mm needles, and yeah, I really like it actually. Really like it. I think I've just got to figure out what it's going to blend to, what the final colour will be. But I think there's some options, and what I want to do is repeat the striping that I've done here to blend when I go into the next colour. But yeah, this one I think you actually will see finished, and it might actually be a successful garter stitch triangular shawl rather than the purple one that I'm not so happy with. So yes, I think that is all my long-term languishing whips. I have a few other whips on the needles, but they're either things that I have plans to show you them when they're done because they're designs, or you've already seen them, or they're ones that I have like literally already frogged. So yeah, I think that's everything. I don't know if that was helpful going through my whips. I hope it was interesting in some way, shape or form. I think it's interesting for me sitting down and talking to all of you, in the sense that it's really given me a motivation to sort things and to figure out what I'm doing with things. I can really appreciate now, having been like a long-term viewer of knitting podcasts, I was always so amazed by how many different ideas they had for content to share, and I found all of the content really interesting. But also, I was always amazed by the amount of stuff they produced, and I think what's been fascinating is even in the very, very short time that I have been doing this, I already feel so much more motivated with my knitting. And I think you can potentially get that same level of motivation from having a knitting group or like a knit night that you go to, where just that being able to share progress with other people, being able to share that enjoyment is such a key part of our craft, I think. So yeah, I just want to say thank you again, as I did at the beginning, for all the support on this podcast. Do keep letting me know what's interesting, what's not, what you'd like me to do more of. But I just wanted to kind of also feedback that this is giving me so much joy on multiple levels, and I was not expecting to produce this much content within the first month, but I'm feeling really inspired and motivated for different types of content to share with you all, and hopefully there'll be some more finished projects happening in the near future, because I am motivated to get those done, to be able to share them. So with that, I will stop rambling, but I wish you all a very good rest of day, rest of week, and I will hopefully see you again soon in my regular podcast episode in about a week's time. Bye for now.